Welcome to Crossroads. The FDA is now warning that a recent shipment of shrimp sold at Walmart may be contaminated with a radioactive material. And meanwhile, the Department of Transportation Secretary has released new details on the illegal immigrant who was involved in the crash while driving a semi that left 3 people dead. And it turns out that apparently non-English speaking truck drivers, CDL drivers, are more dangerous than drugged drivers. And also in other news, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and HHS Secretary RFK Jr., they've unveiled a brand new challenge, the Fit, Not Fat Challenge. Can you take it? We'll be discussing these topics and more in today's episode, so don't forget to hit the like button, leave a comment, and subscribe to our channel to get updates on the next episode is. We have so much great stuff, so be sure to subscribe. Now look, first off, on the radioactive shrimp that was sold at Walmart, allegedly under the Great Value brand. Great Value, I wonder why, which will now be recalled by Walmart. This is what the official alert from the FDA says. They say FDA is actively investigating reports of cesium-137, CS-137, contamination in shipping containers and frozen shrimp products processed by PT Barari Mukmar Sejati, doing business as BMS Foods of Indonesia. The U.S. government, by the way, is now investigating this alongside Indonesian authorities. How did the shrimp become radioactive? Good question. Now, notes the U.S. Customs and Border Protection alerted FDA to the detection of CS-137 in shipping containers at 4 U.S. ports: Los Angeles, Houston, Savannah, Georgia, and Miami. I'm glad to hear that if a shipping container is emanating radioactive signs, that they're watching for it. And apparently they had shrimp inside. It said FDA collected multiple samples for radionuclide analysis, with results confirming the presence of CS-137 in one sample of breaded shrimp. Little extra seasoning on that breaded shrimp, right? And it said all containers and products testing positive or alerting for CS-137 have been denied entry into the country. Now, further, it states this: to date, FDA has learned that Walmart has received implicated raw frozen shrimp imported after the date of first detection of CS-137 by CBP, but from shipments that did not alert for CS-137, meaning they don't know if they're radioactive or not. And notes that FDA has recommended Walmart recall this product, as I would recommend too. And it notes as well, if you have recently purchased raw frozen shrimp from Walmart that matches this description, if you got that Great Value breaded shrimp, they say throw it away. Do not eat or serve this product. Now, what is this radioactive material? Here's what it says about it. It says CS-137 is a radioisotope of cesium that is man-made through nuclear reactions, and because it is widespread worldwide, trace amounts of CS-137 can be found in the environment, including soil, food, and air. Now, an important note on that, because they say it's just in the environment, in the quantities it was discovered in these shipping containers, it would have had to have been man-made. There would have had to have been some kind of intervention, some kind of human accident or intentional action that led to those containers having enough of the contamination to set off the alarms. It's not like just normal air pollution would have been enough for this. Now, notes that FDA food monitoring focuses on radioisotopes that are not formally present and are generally the result of human activities, meaning somebody did it. And the big question now is who done it? Now, at the top of the article, it also notes that avoiding products like this shipment FDA tested with similar levels of CS-137 is a measure intended to reduce exposure to low-level radiation that could have health impacts with continued exposure over a long period of time. Meaning, if you eat one shrimp, maybe you're not going to get tumors, but if you eat a whole bunch of them, you might. If they're these special brand of shrimp that might glow in the dark. Now, notes the primary health effect of concern following longer-term repeated low-dose exposure through consumption of contaminated food or water over time is an elevated risk of cancer resulting from damage to DNA within living cells of the body, meaning you probably don't want to eat it. If you have those shrimp, throw them away. I'm just as curious as you are on whether the flavor is different if they have radioactive contamination. I'm wondering what additional spice it gives. Don't let curiosity take over. Don't let curiosity win. Throw away the radioactive shrimp. Don't do it. And, we'll see what happens with this. They are now looking into how these shipping containers got contaminated. There's a lot of speculation on it. The fact is we don't really know what caused this. There's no answer yet. If we want to entertain some speculation, this is my take. Normal water contamination, normal air pollution would not be enough to set off the alarms on this. I would say there are two likely scenarios. The first likely scenario, somebody was dumping chemicals in Indonesia near where the processing facilities are for these shrimp, and there was contamination through somebody dumping chemicals. The other possibility is the shipping containers themselves. That these shipping containers that were used to ship the shrimp might have been used to transport something like, medical devices that do have some degree of radioactive materials on them, some of them, or some other radioactive materials, and there was cross-contamination. Maybe they didn't properly clean them afterwards. I don't know what procedure they need to remove that type of contamination. But apparently, something with the shipping containers might have also led to this. Or there's also the third option, which is somebody did it intentionally. But if you're a nation state, unless you're like some random terror group, you're not gonna. It's not gonna get passed. It's probably gonna look bad on you. So we'll see what comes out from that. In the meantime, don't eat the special brand shrimp. Just don't do it. Okay. Now look, in other news though. The fatal crash caused allegedly by an illegal immigrant trucker is in the spotlight right now. People are saying, well, how did this guy get a driver's license for a CDL license for a truck? And the answer is, well, somebody violated the law in giving it to him. Did he mislead the system? Did somebody make an exception? Well, we'll find out because they're now investigating it. In the meantime, the Secretary of the Department of Transportation released new details on this whole case. The guy who led to 3 people being killed crashed into the side of his semi as he made a crazy turn blocking the entire road and someone just slammed into him. This is what DOT Secretary Sean Duffy said. He said, this cannot happen again. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration is launching an investigation into both the driver and White Hawk Carrier, the company who hired him. And they say which might actually be a warning shot to companies hiring non-U.S. citizens, because they might take this kind of far. They're even talking about having ICE stationed now at the weighing stations for semis and trucks. So if you're shipping and you have to go across state lines and there's a weighing station, which you have to do, and you're not a U.S. citizen and you're driving illegally, you may get sent back to where you came from and maybe get criminally charged. But here's what they said about this one driver. They say Washington State improperly issued the driver a full-term CDL, commercial driver's license. Asylum seekers or illegal aliens are not allowed to receive this, meaning somebody in Washington State violated the law. Was it the driver? Was it somebody else? Well, we will soon find out. Number 2, they said, New Mexico failed to conduct an English language proficiency test when they pulled the driver over for speeding, meaning they could have saved somebody's life, but they chose not to. They let him off the hook. They could have saved 3 people's lives. They let him off the hook in New Mexico. He went to Florida and caused the death of 3 people. A family, killed a family. They said had they done this, had they done an English proficiency test, the driver would not have been on the road. 3, they say, We are also looking into California's issuance of the driver's CDL, commercial driver's license. They say states must follow the rules. If they had, this driver would never have been behind the wheel and 3 precious lives would still be with us. The failures here are despicable. Non-enforcement and radical immigration policies have turned the trucking industry into a lawless frontier, resulting in unqualified foreign drivers improperly acquiring licenses to operate 40-ton vehicles. They note that POTUS, President Trump and I, moved quickly to require drivers to speak English, our national language as of now, and launch a full-scale audit of how these licenses are doled out. And all of this is just the tip of the iceberg, just the beginning. They say we'll have more updates to share soon. And again, they're going to be taking it pretty seriously. It looks like if you're an illegal immigrant and you're driving a truck, you might want to not do that very soon because they're coming after you. They're actually saying now that illegal immigrant truck drivers, or even just truck drivers in the United States who don't speak English, are more dangerous than people driving on drugs. They're more dangerous, they claim, than people taking drugs and then driving a vehicle. So I don't take it for what you will. Look, meanwhile, the Trump administration, they've unveiled a brand new campaign, the Fit, Not Fat Challenge. Can you take the challenge? Can you pass it? I'll admit I currently can't, but I'm going to try. I'll be talking more about this after we come back from a quick break.
All right, just to pause here for a super quick moment. You are, of course, watching Crossroads with Joshua Philipp. I'm just here to share a message about American Hartford Gold, my own personal gold and silver bullion dealer. Now, obviously, the recent tariffs have made the markets super turbulent and volatile. With every new piece of tariff news, the markets seem to either crash up or crash down. And of course, it's worth mentioning that these conditions don't only affect Wall Street. They affect all of us through our investments and our retirement accounts. That's why I'd like to introduce you to a company that I trust and I myself use to secure my own savings, American Hartford Gold. They specialize in helping Americans move our assets into something tangible, into something you can actually hold, which is physical gold and physical silver, 2 precious metals that act as a hedge against all those decisions being made in Washington, D.C. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. They have thousands of 5-star reviews, and they make the whole buying process super simple. Your metals can be shipped directly to your door, or you can transfer your current retirement account to a tax-advantaged gold IRA. And the best part is that right now, American Hartford Gold is offering an exclusive offer. When you call them today and you mention the name Joshua, you could receive up to $15,000 in free silver with your initial investment. Take advantage of their special offer. You can either just call them at 877-260-2764 or text Joshua to 65532. All their information will also be down in the description box below. And now, back to Crossroads.
Welcome back to Crossroads, a show by the Epoch Times, one of America's largest independent newspapers. And support us in independent journalism by hitting that like button, leave a comment below, and also thank you so much for watching. Now, look, are you ready to take the challenge? Well, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, HHS Secretary RFK Jr., they've unveiled the new challenge, the Fit, Not Fat Challenge. Are you fit enough to take it? This is part of the Make America Healthy Again campaign. Watch this.
All right, here we are in the bowels of the Pentagon for the Pete and Bobby Challenge. I think this was your idea, so I blame you. But it's all about Make America Healthy Again. We're going to be fit, not fat. We want recruits that are ready to go and challenge. What are we doing today, Bobby?
Well, Pete and I are going to do our part, encourage American youth to do this challenge. And the challenge is to do 100 push-ups and 50 pull-ups in any order you want in under 10 minutes.
So 5 minutes is the top standard that we want to meet.
You're not going to be able to do.
military defense shark attack. You can do better, Ranger Tom! Let's go! Make your country proud! Lieutenant Commander Gonzalez, you did the challenge in what time?
3:56.
3:56. 3 minutes and 24 seconds. Gunnery Sergeant Prince. Gunnery Sergeant High. 2 what? 243. 243.
We want to send out a challenge to Sean Duffy.
I'm going to throw it on the military side a little bit too. Let's challenge the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Raising Cane, and then my friend on TV, Will Kane. How about the Pete and Bobby challenge? 100 push-ups, 50 pull-ups, but we hope Americans will take this challenge and you'll pass it along so that we're ready to be fit the way we need to be healthy, and to have a healthy fighting force. Go get it.
Let's make America healthy.
Amen.
That's pretty good, actually. Of course, I can do that. I just don't feel like it. I haven't felt like it for like 10 years. But like I'm joking. I'm gonna try. Okay. If you saw Hegseth, I mean, it's pretty good. He barely beat RFK Jr. on the time. He got 5 minutes, 25 seconds. RFK got 5 minutes. 5 minutes, 25 seconds. RFK got 5 minutes, 48 seconds. It's pretty dang good, actually. I did see reports before. Kennedy does like a lot of push-ups, actually. They both got beat by a few of the troops, though. And they also issued challenges to others in the administration. Maybe this is leading up to the boxing match they're going to have in the White House, right? They're all going to get fit and then have a boxing match. We can keep our fingers crossed. I hope we can see that. The boxing match is actually confirmed, by the way. We don't know who's going to be fighting, but they're going to have a boxing match in the White House. Also, that's interesting, I'd say. Look, aside from the whole campaign of, healthy and fit, the style of that video, to me, is also interesting. Because, what they're doing is they're basically using like internet influencer style to do government messaging. And it's becoming a lot more common. I'd say this is like one step down the line of reality TV, which is heavily edited and everything like that. This is like TikToker style. They're basically doing like live streamer content, but through official accounts of the U.S. government. And I mean, you could argue that that's the way that the country has gone in terms of, what people want. When radio was big, they were using radio. When television was the main thing, they were using television. When social media was the main thing, Trump in 2016, Facebook and all that whole thing, that's how he got a lot of his votes. Now they're turning to these social media style content. It's a big shift we're watching. But back to the fit not fat challenge. Okay, realistic, that's tough. 100 push-ups and 50 pull-ups in 10 minutes. In all honesty, I can probably do about 40 push-ups before my muscles give out. I've actually been trying to get back on board with that. I'm not as good on pull-ups. 50 pull-ups is a tough one. I'm gonna try and do it though. On a personal note, I've been trying to get fit again. I'm a sucker for the campaigns. Some of you may make fun of me for this. Have any of you seen, they call it Armored Combat League, where these guys dress in full knight armor and have full contact fights? They're doing it with MMA now, where they dress in knight armor and they have like full MMA fights. There's another group, they do it and they do like medieval style, Bohurt style, where it's full contact with swords and axes, but they try to get the other guy to their knees. I watched one of those videos and I was like, I want to do that. So I went and joined a class in New York for armored combat, and I realized how out of shape I am. So it kicked my butt, to be honest. And so I'm trying to get in shape so I can wear knight armor and axe fight guys. I'm embracing it, folks. I'm going back to tradition. So I'm taking the challenge. Will you take it too? You tell me. Let's see if we can do it. On another note, we're now on the topic of getting in better shape. It turns out Americans are starting to eat smaller portions as well. We're not only working out more, we're also dieting. One of the challenges with that is if you go to restaurants, they tend to give you too much food. If any of you go to Europe and you order something, you might notice the portions of meals are much smaller than what they give to us. people criticize us for it. They're like, wow, you give food that you could feed like 3 Europeans on for your average meal. Well, Americans have found a way around this. Adults are now buying from the kids menu, which is like a normal European-sized meal, oftentimes. MarketWatch said this. They say apparently grown-ups love a good kiddie meal, too. They said that's one of the takeaways from a new survey conducted by Lightspeed Commerce, a company that provides payment systems to the hospitality industry. It says the survey found that 44% of U.S. diners say they ordered children's meals for themselves at restaurants. 44%. I had no idea. I had no idea. Maybe those are Happy Meals because people want the collectible toys. I can understand. They note their reasons for doing so. Well, those surveys cited smaller portions as being a key factor, but also pointed to budget-friendly prices and simpler choices. So maybe some people are doing it just because we don't have as much money. Maybe it's not just about health. They say this also, so the boom is also reflected in data from market researcher Circana, which found that orders by adults for kids' meals increased, they say, by 30%. So one said over 40%, there was at 30% from 2019 to 2025, and saying that's in spite of the fact that overall restaurant traffic is down for the period. It says experts say the underlying causes speak to changes in eating habits, with many Americans on appetite-suppressing GLP-1 medications. Trump calls it the fat shot. I don't think that's a very nice way to put it. It's a hunger suppressant people are taking. I have a friend who took it, actually. I went and hung out with him recently. I was like, man, you've been working out? He's like, no, I've been taking the fat shot. It works. I've heard it can affect your health in other ways, so be cautious with it if you are taking it. But they say this. They say it's natural that many diners want to order less food because if you're not as hungry, you probably don't want to eat as much food. They said, but people taking those drugs are not the only ones who feel this way. One individual they interviewed, Chaniqua Major, a 36-year-old resident of Orlando, Florida, says that she opts for kids' meals simply because she prefers a lighter option. I'm not doing that. I like me a good old hamburger if I got to eat, and that's just the way I roll. Actually, funny enough, though, that is part of a more traditional diet. Epoch Times were started by Chinese dissidents, of course. I have a lot of Chinese colleagues. The traditional Chinese diet is the stop eating so dang much diet. They say if you're starting to gain weight, they call it the 80% diet. You just eat, you don't starve yourself. You just reduce the size of your portions and you don't snack between meals. They say you eat 80% of what you normally do. So, how do you quantify that? Get your normal meal, take away about, put it in your plate, take away about 20% of that, and that's your new portion if you want to lose weight. And then don't snack between meals. That's the samurai diet, something I'm into. You can read this in ancient Japanese samurai books, one of them being The Way of the Night by Yamaga Soko, one of my favorite books. The samurai diet, they say that 3 meals a day will maintain your weight. If you eat more than 3 meals a day, you will gain weight. If you eat less than 3 meals a day, you will lose weight. So they say the samurai diet, they actually recommend micro-fasting. The key with it is don't snack between meals. I'd say do that sparingly. Don't starve yourself. If I want to lose weight, typically I do both. I will do both the 80% diet and I'll usually remove 1 meal. But that's just me, right? I don't necessarily recommend that. That's just what I do. Now, on this point, though, people turn to the kids menu. Hey, that's another avenue toward the 80% diet, depending on where you go, because sometimes the kids meal is pretty big also. The meal portions, if you do that, with a lot of restaurants, if you order from the adult menu, they tend to give you too much food. In America, we understand that. That's why we have to-go bags. I know if you go to Europe, they don't really take their food to go as much. I guess it's more of an American thing. But you can take the food to go and make 2 meals out of it. Do what you choose. I don't know. You all tell me, do 30% of you order from the kids menu? I don't know. You tell me. Now, look, another topic, though, speaking of health, by the way, soon your doctor may have been trained in another country, which could lead to interesting and wonderful results. There are reports going around that foreign-trained doctors are now going to start practicing in North Carolina, just like foreign-trained drivers are driving on our roads. Now you have foreign-trained doctors being your doctor. Others said it's a big old fake story. That is fake news. But what's the truth of it? As usual, the truth is somewhere in the middle. It's kind of true. It's kind of false and it's kind of true. Let me show you what's really going on. Lead Story says this. They say, did North Carolina pass a law allowing foreign doctors to practice medicine in that state without taking a U.S. qualification exam? They say, no, that's not true. Note what they did as fact checkers, okay? Note what they did here, because this is a common tactic used by fact checkers. They say, did North Carolina pass a law allowing foreign doctors to practice medicine in the state without taking a U.S. qualification exam? The claims going around, right? The actual reports going around, they're saying North Carolina passed a law that lets foreign doctors practice medicine in the state. That's what the claims are saying. They added an additional qualifier, that state without taking a U.S. qualification exam. So they added something to this which changes the nature of it. And so what's actually true here? They say, no, this is all fake. They say it is not true that they're not taking a U.S. qualification exam, but the first part is true. This is oftentimes what fact checkers do when they want to lie to you. They'll say, fact check false, when in actuality it's half true, and they add an additional qualifier to something nobody was even talking about in order to say everybody else is wrong. What is the truth of it? They actually do state it further in. They say the legislation, which was signed into law by North Carolina's governor on July 1st, 2025, addresses a severe shortage of primary physicians at the state's rural hospitals by giving non-U.S. trained doctors new licensure pathways, according to a North Carolina medical board. They note the law requires foreign doctors to not only have passed their own country's medical qualification exams, obviously foreign doctors, but another test chosen by the North Carolina Medical Board. They say the doctors can only practice in the rural hospitals where they are hired, and they must be supervised by another licensed physician. In other words, yes, it is true. Foreign doctors can now practice medicine in North Carolina. The caveat to that is they need to get an additional test. I would say these reports, these fact checks, they're oftentimes quite deceptive in how they say something is false, because they make it look like everything is false, when in reality, it's a bit of both. It's a little truth, it's a little falsehood. The technicality here is that foreign doctors could be able to practice in parts of North Carolina, but they still need to pass an examination. And that examination is going to be whatever the local medical board decides it should be. Will that be, can you spell your name in English? Or will that be, answer these basic medical questions? We don't really know. Are they going to be required to qualify for the same type of things that doctors in America do? Or is it going to be something else? And will it also change over time? Will it start as something very strict and turn into something very lenient? We do not know. Importantly, the foreign doctors, they're still also going to need to be supervised by another licensed physician. Now, my take on this, look, I can see both sides. On one side, I think there's the fair question. Are these foreign-trained doctors going to be about as effective as foreign-trained drivers, right? That's one of the fair questions to ask. Are these doctors going to be driving like a commercial driver, so to speak, driving your health? On the other side of it, I know there are a lot of doctors, very qualified, who cannot practice medicine in the U.S. I have a personal experience with this. My father-in-law, he went to medical school in France. He was a surgeon in France. He actually led one of the medical wings in France and in Cambodia, so European trained. When he moved to the United States, he could not practice as a doctor because of the restrictions on doctors. He's very well qualified. Again, I know him, right? Very qualified, was a very well-respected doctor in France and in Cambodia, but also in France, which we would see as more credible on that. And he couldn't practice medicine in the U.S. So, I mean, I can understand both sides. I can understand both sides on this. I mean, I don't know. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. On another topic, though, deportations. They're about to go into overdrive. And why is that? Well, for a lot of reasons. One of them being they're opening up a whole bunch of these new facilities, but also because they're getting a lot more leeway and a lot of other stuff is happening. Washington Post said this. They say, when President Donald Trump took office this year, it hasn't even been a year yet. Isn't that crazy? When Trump took office this year, the United States already commanded the largest immigration detention system in the world, with the capacity to hold close to 50,000 migrants. If they're migrants, they wouldn't be getting deported. So they're misusing the term here. These are not migrants. The only place they're migrating to is back to the country they came from because they're illegal immigrants. But they say this, right away, his administration set a goal of doubling it, not just 50,000, but 100,000 people. Why does that matter? Here's why. The capacity of 50,000 people, if Trump could only deport 50,000 illegal immigrants in every 14-day period, which, again, they can only hold them for a certain amount of time when they deport them, that's not going to hit much. That means every month they're going to be deporting, like, I don't know, maybe 100,000 or a bit more people. And if Trump wants to deport, 20 million or 30 million, they're not going to reach that, right? It's just not possible. The capacity of these facilities was the bottleneck. Basically, because of the lack of space and beds, the bottleneck was 50,000 deportations roughly every 2 weeks within that. But they note the administration wanted to double that. Those are rookie numbers. Let's pump those numbers up. They say an internal planning roadmap obtained by the Washington Post shows for the first time exactly how immigration authorities plan to reach that goal, doubling it, including by opening or expanding 125 facilities this year. That's a lot of new facilities. Think Alligator Alcatraz. Think the new one they just opened in Texas, the Lone Star Lockup. Think of the one they just announced in Nebraska. They're calling it the Cornhusker Clink. Yes, they're going to be coming up with weird names for all of these now. I'm waiting for California to launch the fentanyl facility. We'll see. But they note this, by January, ICE will have the capacity to hold more than 107,000 people, 107,000. Internal agency documents show. So remember, they wanted to double the number, 50,000 to 100,000. By January, they're expected to hit that. And will it end there? Will it go beyond that? We'll have to see. Remember, 50,000 is still a lot. Creating 50,000 new beds, that's a lot of beds. A lot of these facilities, even some of the largest ones, they have like 4,000 or 5,000 capacity. Think about a prison. And every facility can hold 5,000 people, you're going to have a lot more than 107,000 by the end of it. I'll tell you that right now. But we'll see how that goes. As I mentioned before, capacity at these facilities, it's one of the bottlenecks. They need to expand the bottleneck if they're going to actually expand the deportations. One of the problems the Trump administration was reporting early on, it didn't get a lot of news coverage. Basically, ICE was arresting people and they had to let them go because they didn't have a place to put them. They didn't have the capacity for it. So to change that, they need to build more. They need the facilities. They need to expand them. They need to come up with all these goofy names. And the money for all of that, well, they got it now. The money for that was delegated through the big, beautiful bill, the BBB. And because of that, we are now likely going to start seeing these facilities all across the country being set up. Similar to Alligator Alcatraz, which is like a state thing, combined with the U.S. federal government. Or I think what we're going to see a lot of is what they're doing in Texas with the Lone Star lockup. Yes, we need to call them by the names now. That one's on a military base. And I think the military base approach will be more common across the U.S., especially in blue states, because they don't need the cooperation of the local government. We'll see how it goes, but that's what's happening. Now look, on another topic, the peace deal between Russia and Ukraine is moving forward. The next big step, Trump is trying to arrange a meeting between Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky, where they're going to take their glasses, clink them together, and then stare at them in a paranoid manner while not drinking them, I assume. I'm half joking. We'll see how it goes. Trump is also going to hold a meeting with himself and the two leaders. It actually, everything jokes aside, it does look like they're actually moving towards a real peace deal. It really does. Trump is celebrating as well. Trump's approval rating jumped 10% or 10% just through these latest deals. The media, the big corporate media, they're doing everything they can to criticize it. As weird as it sounds, I think a lot of the media and many political activists, they don't want a peace deal, not because they don't want peace, but because it'll make Trump probably look very good if he gets it. This is going to be like a big badge that Trump's going to pin to his North Korean-style pin setup, and he's going to wear it around and show everybody, look what I did. And they don't want that, you know what I mean? Already, again, he's jumped 10 points in approval polls. That's a lot, or 10%, that's a lot. But there is somebody else who doesn't want this, or let's say wants to be part of it. The Chinese Communist Party, they feel left out. They say, Russia, we thought you were our friend. Why are we not part of these conversations? Ukraine, you're part of the Belt and Road Initiative. Where is China? Breitbart says this: the Chinese Foreign Ministry declared Beijing supportive of all efforts toward a peaceful settlement in Ukraine on Monday and emphasized support for dialogue following Russian strongmen, they say, Vladimir Putin's latest visit to Alaska on Friday to meet with President Donald Trump. And they say this: the China Position White Paper, where the CCP made its position. This needs to reflect the interests of the Chinese Communist Party. It notes the white paper did not offer any concrete steps or help establish any dialogue or negotiation. They're saying, we want peace. Come and talk to us. No, we're not offering dialogue or negotiation. And yeah, we might have published an official statement recently saying we're not going to allow the deal to end, not allow the war to end. We want to keep the war going indefinitely so that America is distracted by supporting Ukraine and Russia is just sacrificing its people for the sake of the future continuation of the Chinese Communist Party, just sacrificing them like human sacrificial lambs to the survival of the CCP. No dialogue, no negotiation, but hey, make us part of the dialogue for a negotiation. Makes sense, right? Well, not according to them, because they say this. They say dialogue, this is the CCP, right? Dialogue and negotiation are the only viable solutions to the Ukraine crisis. All efforts conducive to the peaceful settlement of the crisis must be encouraged and supported. The paper read without elaborating, because the CCP, while stating that, is also stating they're not going to allow the war to end. But guess what? It says here, both Ukraine and Russia ignored the white paper. Say what you will, CCP. You keep on knocking, but you can't come in. Nobody cares. Russia ignored them. Ukraine ignored them. And they're not part of the dialogue. They say the only nation to celebrate the Chinese peace proposal as meaningful and actionable was the socialist government of Brazil. Lula in Brazil, who was in prison and was let out by the Supreme Court there, which they say has also attempted unsuccessfully to insert itself into the Ukraine conflict, because Brazil is obviously an international player, right? They say Brazilian President Lula Inácio Lula da Silva has limited his involvement in the conflict after multiple personal disputes with Zelensky. They didn't get along, and it didn't work out. In other words, the CCP is trying to get into these debates, and nobody's paying attention to them because they made their statements clear. The Chinese Communist Party does not want the war to end. They want this to continue. Their only interest in the war is keeping it going, so the United States is focused on that instead of security in the Asia-Pacific region. They've even stated it publicly. They're not even trying to hide it. So my take on this, good. They should absolutely keep the Chinese Communist Party out of the talks. Keep the wolf out of the hen house. It has no good intention. It even stated it publicly. They don't want peace. They literally wrote it publicly recently. They don't want peace. Why would you involve them in a peace talk? Now, look, on another note, though, Texas looks like it's finally going to move forward with votes for redistricting. And remember, they've been trying to hold votes to redistrict, possibly taking 5 seats away from Democrats. Democrats do not want that to happen. Democrats are blocking this. They left the state. They were hiding in Chicago, literally. Texas was saying they're going to go arrest them. They're going to go lasso them up and bring them back. And they came back under those threats. The Texas government has now put some additional measures in place to make sure they don't block the vote again. Newsmax said this: Texas Democrats who ended a walkout found themselves shadowed by law enforcement to keep them from repeating the protests that stalled Republican efforts to redraw congressional districts. And as Republicans in the Texas House forced returning Democrats, they actually did force them. They said, come back or we're going to throw you in jail. They actually did do that. On the other side, you could say that Democrats were violating some local laws by doing what they did. So, you could say who was really guilty here, I don't know. But they say they forced returning Democrats to sign what the Democrats called permission slips, agreeing to around-the-clock surveillance by State Department or public safety officers to leave the floor. They're being shadowed. They say, however, Representative Nicole Collier, a Democrat from Fort Worth, refused and remained on the House floor Monday night. She just stayed there. You're fine, I'm not leaving. They say the Democrats' return to Texas put the Republican-run legislature in position to finish redistricting possibly later this week. In other words, they're going to redistrict, and they've blocked the Democrats from blocking it, basically. They say this is as California Democrats advance new congressional boundaries in retaliation. California is going to redistrict even more. You thought they've already redistricted and they can't do it anymore. Well, they're cranking that radio up to 11. That's why it goes from 10 to 11. They're giving it that extra pump. It says lawmakers had officers posted outside their capital in Texas and outside their offices. And suburban Dallas Representative Mihaela Pleza said that one tailed her on her Monday evening drive back to her apartment in Austin after spending much of the day on a couch in her office. She said he went with her for her staff lunch and even down the hallway with her for restroom breaks, I assume waiting outside, making sure she's not going to try to escape to Chicago again. And she said, quote, "We were kind of laughing about it, to be honest, but this is really serious stuff." And she added, "This is a waste of taxpayer dollars in really performative theater." Now, look, is this a waste of taxpayer dollars? Is this performative theater? Or was it the other side? Was them fleeing and avoiding the vote and going to Chicago? Actually, and there are criminal investigations into some of them now. Texas is actually moving forward with that. Was that performative theater? Is it performative theater in response to performative theater? Or is none of it performative theater? I don't know. Do you think this is excessive? Is this about defending democracy? Maybe the Democrats are trying to defend democracy by protecting the districts from changing. Are Republicans defending democracy while making sure that the people you vote to make things like this are not being blocked by people who are the minority party? You tell me. I don't know. I'd say both sides. It's kind of bizarre. I do think personally it's fair to say Democrats did violate probably some laws by fleeing the state to block the vote. I don't think that was necessarily legal. Was it right? I don't know. You tell me. But also it's pretty funny, honestly, that they're following him around now and made him sign permission slips. Anyways, wild times, right? That said, questions, comments, anything you want to talk about, leave it in the chat. Let's jump into a discussion. First off, from James Dyson, he talked about the truck drivers. Any truck driver knows, except for this illegal alien truck driver and others like him, that you cannot do a U-turn on a highway, any highway. You can only do that in a parking lot or through a short reroute or detour. Yeah, and I'd argue most good point, but I'd also say most truck drivers, even if you have like a trailer, you probably know that you can't drive across a freeway and block the entire freeway with your load. Obviously, people are going to crash into that and get killed, and that's what happened. Like, what kind of crazy lack of basic reasoning would lead a person to do something like this? What kind of lack of just the most basic form of common sense would lead a person to think that was a good idea? I don't know. I mean, the normal driving equivalent to that would be if you were in the far right lane and you wanted to do a U-turn, and so instead of getting in the left lane, you went from the far right lane and cut across the entire freeway with incoming traffic to do your U-turn. Who would do that? So anyway, I don't know. Is this a problem of that particular driver? Is this a problem of all foreign illegal immigrant CDL drivers? I don't know. What is coming out is this, though. It is coming out that this is more common than we've been led to believe. Apparently, illegal immigrant truck drivers are a very serious problem when it comes to accidents. This is not just like a one-time thing. This is apparently kind of common. The difference now is we're actually hearing about it. The media typically wouldn't really talk about it. You didn't really hear government reports on it because they wouldn't, the police are not going to report illegal immigrant truck driver normally. We're only hearing about this now because it's being reported, but this is apparently kind of common. My basis of saying that is that before this accident happened, the federal government, the Trump administration, they were already taking steps to make it so they have English proficiency for CDL drivers, commercial drivers. So if you're driving a truck, or if you're driving a semi in the U.S., even if you're from a French-speaking part of Canada or you're coming from Mexico, in other words, you're not an American citizen, but you're here driving a truck, from that country, you still need to have English proficiency. They're making that a requirement. And so this is kind of piggybacked on top of that whole initiative that in addition to not having English proficiency, there's also a problem of illegal immigrants who have somehow been able to get driver's license for commercial vehicles. And even in addition to that, I'd add, which California noted, some are taking it as a possible admission of guilt on their part. Already under federal law, it is illegal. It's not legal for an illegal alien or even a non-U.S. citizen to get a CDL license. So if people are getting them, it is already illegal. It's just apparently not being properly enforced. So we're going to be hearing a lot more on that soon, I'd say. TZ Burton, you're saying, wasn't Godzilla contaminated with radioactive shrimp? You know what? I think that's kind of how Godzilla started. I think it was Akira Kurosawa, great director. If you've never seen, okay, good movie recommendation, Yojimbo. Yojimbo. That movie is basically Fistful of Dollars by Clint Eastwood. The Japanese version was the original. The movie Magnificent Seven is based on another Kurosawa film called Seven Samurai, one of my favorite movies. I mean, if you can sit through a black and white, subtitled Japanese movie, but they're good movies. They're really good movies. Akira Kurosawa was involved in the first Godzilla movie. And for him, it was more, I used to be into this stuff. I watched like the director's commentary and stuff. Kurosawa wanted to create like a cautionary tale about nuclear weapons. And so the Godzilla movie was kind of an analogy of the danger of nuclear weapons. And the story was an iguana, gets caught up in the nuclear blast, gets radioactivated and turns into Godzilla. So the original Godzilla was a radioactive iguana. Again, classic movies. If anybody ever watched the old Godzilla movies, they're extremely cheesy. They're super cheesy, but they're kind of fun. So watch Godzilla and Mothra if you want to have a super cheesy movie night. And I don't know, maybe we'll get superpowers too from the radioactive shrimp, such as cancer. I don't recommend it, but who knows? Ashley from California, you're saying fact checkers fact check technicalities, not dissect and discuss the actual claim. Yeah, and you know what? This is a real common. This is a common tactic you also see in politics. So what a lot of this is the fact checkers, and it's like political activists. You see this all the time. As a journalist, I have to watch for this because this is one of the most common tactics of lying. This is how they lie to you. So what they do is this. You might say, okay, like here's a basic analogy. Someone says, hey, did you go to 7-Eleven last night? And you did go to 7-Eleven. You'll be like, no, I didn't go to 7-Eleven and buy an Arizona iced tea. What are you talking about? You added an additional qualifier, you see? I did not go to 7-Eleven and buy an Arizona iced tea. But the question was, did you go to 7-Eleven, right? The fact is, yeah, you did go. And you'd be lying if you said, no, I did not go. But in order to not lie, and in order to cover up that you did it, you add an additional qualifier. I did not buy, when I went there, an Arizona iced tea, right? That's a super common way that people lie, in the more official sense. So for example, if you're called in to testify before Congress, this is like the slippery eel way to get out of it. They add qualifiers to statements like that. Were you aware that this took place? No, I wasn't aware that took place, and this happened, right? And this happened. And so when they try to put you on trial for lying, right, because let's say technically you lie before Congress, you can say, no, I didn't lie. I never did the and this. I didn't go to 7-Eleven and buy the Arizona iced tea. Yeah, I went to 7-Eleven, but I didn't do that. And they're like, well, that wasn't the question. Like, well, that wasn't my answer, right? You can also do that. A lot of slimy journalists do this. The absolute scum on the bottom of the swimming pool, the bottom of the swamp, the scum of the industry do this often. They will do that as a qualifier for defamation or for libel. And so when they do this, here's what they do. If they want to defame you, if they want to lie about you, or they want to make a defamatory statement, they'll do that as well. And so they might make, false suggestions or false conclusions based on true information, things like that. Well, that was my personal opinion based on the true information. They'll make false conclusions from true, undeniable facts. And oftentimes the interpretation is what forms the public perception. And so, they could say, did COVID-19 leak from a Chinese laboratory? No scientific study has been able to validate it because you can't get access to the Chinese laboratories. But all evidence points to it is the likely condition. Was it ever proven? No, because China won't let you into the laboratory. Does all evidence point that way? Yes. And so what they do is this, using that as an analogy, right, a hypothetical. False, fact check false. They lied to you. This is a fake report. And look, I'm kind of talking about myself because in 2020, I did the documentary investigating the origins of COVID, and I got fact checked by it, right? I'll use the fact check they used against me as the example. So Facebook, if you had shared my documentary tracking the origins of the Wuhan coronavirus back in 2020, right when the whole thing was happening, right? If you shared my video on Facebook, you would have gotten an alert saying you shared false information. What was the basis of that? They went by a Reuters fact checker. What was the basis of the Reuters fact checker? The Reuters fact checker was an individual who said that it was impossible for a lab leak to have happened in Wuhan in China because the security in the Wuhan Institute of Virology is too good. That was the basis of their fact check. It turned out the person who wrote that article used to work at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. As a journalist, I would call that a conflict of interest and a ridiculous conclusion. You're saying that no leak could take place because you believe that the security is too good for it to happen. And then later studies did show, no, there were a lot of problems with it. That was the basis of their fact check. After that was exposed, they did a follow-up fact check, and they ignored all of my research, and then they challenged one element, which was actually based on an actual scientific paper, and basically said it was non-conclusive. And because there was no hard conclusion, they claimed it was fake because an inconclusive report was used to substantiate it. Obviously, there was no conclusions on it because, again, it happened when the investigations were still underway. And if you watch my documentary, I just talked about the public reporting, right? A lot of which was later deleted, erased from the internet, and disappeared. I think if you go back and watch that documentary, I don't think I would, at this point, because now a lot of facts have come out, I have not had to issue any retractions. Everything I reported has since held up. And so what am I going to do now? Sue Facebook for it? Maybe I should, but the problem you have is unless they bring it back up, it's like you can't. You have like a year limit on this stuff, right? Statute of limitations, and so that's how they do this kind of stuff. The media industry tied in with the censorship industrial complex is so filthy. It is such a dirty industry. But this is how they do that kind of stuff. There's a lot of lying through really slimy means that takes place within the media industry. It's really such a dirty industry. Look, I'm a journalist, okay? I'm a journalist because I believe news is important, because I believe people having accurate information and journalists doing due diligence is a necessary part of having a free country. I think that if you don't have valid sources of information, you're not going to have the proper judgment to decide who you're going to elect for president, who you're going to vote for, whether a product is safe or not, whether you want that special injection in your arm. I think the public needs to have information if you're going to have an election system, if you're going to have medical informed consent. And I think there are people who intentionally want to manipulate that because they want to control people. They want to lie to people. I'm a journalist more based on an ideological stance, and that's more so my motivation for doing what I do. I genuinely believe in the value of news, in the value of accurate information. And I know I've gone on a long tangent on this, but I get bothered by dishonest journalists. The dishonesty of the industry legitimately bothers me. Because I think it costs people lives. I think it leads to tyranny. I think it causes a lot of problems. And I think it is one of the greatest violations of public trust when you have dishonest journalists, personally. Which is why I do what I do and why I'm so grateful for you all to be here. That said, let me know in the comments what you think, right? I don't claim to be like an absolute authority on everything. I'm always researching. I never believe that I know everything. I think it's a dangerous place for a journalist to believe they know everything, because when you think you know everything, you stop researching. I believe in always having an open mind, always being relatively humble at the feet of, reporting, which is the process of fact-finding. And, for me, due diligence also requires a belief that you don't know everything. So let me know what you all think. Do you think the media do you think it's honest when public reports or media add qualifiers to say that something is absolutely false? Do you think the fact checkers are necessary? Because, the other side of it is, if there's no fact checkers, who is holding media to account? Do you think there's a problem of bias within the fact checkers, where they might say something is true or false because of their own political ideology or because of financial interest? There's also the question of who fact checks the fact checkers. Who's the authority? Should we, quote unquote, trust the science and all dissenting viewpoints should be suppressed and eliminated? Or do you believe in an absolute interpretation of the marketplace of ideas? Let everybody speak what they will. Let truth be held up by the public debate, and let falsehood be exposed by the presentation of facts. What do you think is the best way for the free flow of information? Do you think it should be regulated or not? What do you think? Let me know in the comments. That said, thank you so much for being here. Please don't forget to hit the like button. It's a small effort, and it helps us quite a bit when it comes to the algorithms. Also, subscribe if you haven't yet. Join us again tomorrow, also 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. And in the meantime, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.